Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast with Benji Naesen. This is going to be our recap first of the E3 Saxo Bank Classic, formerly known as Harelbeke. Didn't know that Saxo Bank was still allowed to sponsor things in cycling, but here we are. Not their fault, I guess. We'll also have the Volta a Catalunya Stage 5 recap finishing in Manresa. So if you're watching on YouTube, that'll be a separate video, but E3 first on the pod, Catalunya second. Before we get into that, I want to mention something from our show partner, Lacole. Not a kit launch this time, but I know a lot of you ride, probably 90% of you, although I don't know the exact number, ride as well. Lacole do group Zwift rides with Chris Opie, formerly of GCN. I think one of them is on Friday mornings at 7:10 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. I think that's 8:10 for continental Europe and America. Well, early, but maybe some of you are crazy and get up super early. So the link is in the Lacole Instagram bio, and you can check that out if you're interested. But onto E3 Saxo Bank Classic. Benji, can you just let people know, where is this in Flanders? How is the route different to, say, a Gent-Wevelgem or a Tour of Flanders?
So it finished in Harelbeke. Obviously, it's the E3 Harelbeke without the sponsor name added to it. It's near the south of West Flanders and near the region where the Tour of Flanders is being ridden. So it takes a lot of the similarly taken climbs as in those races, like the Oude Kwaremond, like the Paterberg and so forth. So it's basically in that same area as the Ronde van Vlaanderen. When it comes to Gent-Wevelgem, this one goes a bit more towards the area where the Kemmelberg lies, and that's one that you cannot see in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, for example. So I think that's the real difference between those two races. So yeah, E3 and Ronde van Vlaanderen basically in the similar area.
Okay, start list absolutely stacked. Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, and Quickstep's team with last year's winner, Zidnek, Stibar, Lampard, de Klerk, Ballerini, Seneschal, Van Leeuwenberg, and Askren Obscene team. Azure Dessert, Citroën got the supposed to be good cobbled classics team, Van Avermaet, Oliver Narsens, Van der Wolf, Scher, Tuze, Geisch, Van Hocker, Sepp Van Mark, Pidcock, some of the other big names here, and Stefan Kung. The course, 204 Ks, a lot of the climbs Benji mentioned. Probably the big one is the Tyenberg with 80 Ks to go is where it really kicks off. And they've got, it's just a series of constant climbs, barely any flat except the last 13 kilometers. So recovery is almost impossible. The last major climb is at Tiekenberg, which comes with about 20 kilometers to go. That's the one that Oliver Narsens famously got dropped on. But the action really kicked off when Quinn Simmons attacked before the Tyenberg in front of Sturven. He just attacked, rolled off the front. Not sure whether he was just worried there was going to be a move on the Tyenberg and wanted to be up the front, but no one went with him. And then in the run to the Tyenberg, the run into these climbs is so hectic and the roads are so narrow. I still don't know how they're legally allowed to be two-way roads. Just doesn't seem right to me. And Quickstep just flooded the front with about 81 Ks to go with their stacked team, and then absolutely launched it on the Tyenberg. Who was their main initiator, Benji? Was it Seneschal or Lampard?
We saw that Lampard and Asgreen were the two riders that went to the front. So those were the riders that were making the biggest of moves at that Tyenberg. And the thing about this Tyenberg is it's a climb where Bonen always attacked. So I think it's in the hearts of the Koenig to do something here. They set this entire attack up. And I was kind of expecting a bit of a test move because in the past, Tom Bonen went on this climb to give an initial try and see how everybody would respond if he goes for his first attack in the race. And well, quite simply, we started the Tyenberg with basically a peloton, and we were 75% in, and two of the Koenig riders at the front. We saw that Van der Poel and Van Aert were countering those two, And I think we topped with 5 riders together, and then a bit of a gap, then 2 riders there, then a bit of a gap, then 1 rider there, and a bit
Yeah.
of a gap. And eventually it really came down to a group of, I think, 13, right?
Yeah, maybe a little bit less than
That's
that.
9.
It had four quick step riders: Lampard, Seneschal, Stibar, Askren, Crazy, Wout van Aert, Van der Poel, Trentin, Michael Matthews, and Jesper Sturven. Soren Kragh Andersen was sort of trying to catch back onto them after the Timeberg. So everyone was isolated except the four De Koenig riders. I should say, for completeness, that there was a breakaway up the road, uh, not too far up the road and not too threatening for anybody. Greipel, Marco Haller, Milan, Jacobs, Yellow Eyes in there, but no one from De Koenig or Alpecin or Jumbo Visma. And Wout van Aert had a flat tyre. And now you said, Benji, on Twitter, disc brakes were an issue. I didn't actually catch the repair or what was going on with the mechanical. Was there a slow changeover? Did they change bikes? Did they change the wheel?
It was the Shimano dudes that
Okay.
came well and helped him, and eventually ended up in the second group. So I was making a bit of a disc brake joke as always when this happens to a rider with disc brakes on, because on many occasions when it's a back wheel and so forth, it's basically, yeah, if you're a rider with a back wheel issue and you've got disc brakes on, then you're gonna have trouble replacing either the wheel or figuring out how to fix that. So that's gonna take longer than if it's a front wheel. I think it's easier to do so, but I could be wrong there. But it still is significantly longer than with with different brakes, with rim brakes. So yeah, I think that I don't know if it impacted here, but it sure as hell had him drop to the second group, and eventually that led towards Jumbo taking over in the second group, and it kind of changed the scales, tipped the scales of the race a bit, because we thought that the second group
Yeah.
was potentially already gone, because well, if all the important people are in the front group, then it could just as easily be that group going to the finish line, but it was still like 75, 80 kilometers to go, so a long way from the finish line, and yeah, that Wout van Aert puncture tipped the scales.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Wout van Aert puncture at that moment, because you got to remember, it's pretty much an elite break group. Wout van Aert dropping meant that they, Jumbo Visma, burnt all their riders, bringing Wout van Aert back, and took a few Ks to do so. With 67 Ks to go, they were 20 seconds behind that Van der Poel group. 66 Ks to go, they got on the Bornenberg, Askren attacked, and this is what Quickstep do. They don't get multiple riders, well, except for Omloop 2015, but if they get multiple riders in a group early with 60 Ks to go, it's not just to pace everybody to the last 5 kilometers, it's to attack. So Askren, big engine, attacked with 66 to go. Well, for now, we knew though, with Askren attacking and with although the other riders not having teammates, De Koenig starting to block in that group of favourites, we knew Wout van Aert was coming back. So that was fine for him, but it just changed whether that group was. I thought it was going to work better. He gets back, Van der Poel attacks immediately. Maybe he could have attacked a bit earlier. I'm not sure if the unwritten rules apply in classics. And
You
but
want to see the world
he
burn, mate?
yeah, I know. Maybe there's beef between Van der Poel and Wout van Aert, but he didn't get too much of a gap. Who was bringing him back, Benji?
Oh, good question. I don't actually remember who took back Van der Poel. I think Van Aert was one of the first riders to get back to
Yeah,
Van der Poel's wheel. And we saw that the people behind there were struggling. That was the likes of De Koenig at the front of that group trying to close down Van Aert. And that seemed to be working because, well, De Koenig had one very, very powerful Stibar today. Like,
oh yeah,
I was super surprised. It's been since 2019 E3, like you mentioned earlier, that he showed that he was one of the stronger couple riders. Didn't have a good season last year, and today he came back, and holy crap, he was good today because he just went to Wout van Aert's wheel. Wout van Aert closed that down to Van der Poel, and it kind of stopped a tiny bit, but the tempo still kept on. I'd say that the tempo still worked for a tiny bit, but eventually that group came back together, and there were continuous attacks in that group, and then a bit of
Yeah.
a second group formed behind Asgreen because of the continuous attacks with the likes of a Uno X Rider. Shout out to those guys! Like generally one of the teams that totally deserve the wild cards they get. Every single time they're in a race, we see them basically the entire race today again with Hulgard in the group with Oliver Naesen, Turgi, and a few others. And that was a group that was chasing Asgreen at that moment. And, well, I think that was there one De Koning rider in there as well? I think I remember one.
Yes, there was a Koenig rider in pretty much every group. It might have been Stibar or Seneschal. So basically what Benji said, for the next hour, we have Kasper Askren just floating off the front, riding his pace, and everyone getting it to within 20 seconds. There was a Narsen Stefan Kung group. They'd attacked out of the Wout van Aert Mathieu van der Poel group and were lingering off the front. And this is all playing into Quickstep's hands because instead of the large 25, 20 rider group working together seamlessly, it was basically the second or third tier favourites like the Azure Desert and Kung group working without too much help. And then the top favourites, Wout van Aert and MVDP, in the third group, like a minute back, having to pull on their own. So they're getting tired as well. All the while, Stibar, Seneschal, Lampard was coming back with Dylan Van Baal. They were able to sit on for a lot of the race as well. So skipping forward to about maybe before the Paterberg, Van Avermaet was in a group with Stibar and Van der Poel, and Van Aert decided to attack out of that group. I think they were trying to get back to the Naesen group. They bridged or worked into that gap and had 20 seconds. They were 20 seconds behind Askren going into the Isle de Quaremont. So we've got Naesen, Kung, I think, Van Aert, Van der Poel, still Askren at 20 seconds, and multiple times they'd brought him to 11 seconds, 12 seconds. They'd get really close. Quickstep would come and block. Everyone was tired. NVDP and Wout van Aert would look behind and say, come on, guys, someone else help us out here. And it would go out once again. And that's just the strength of Kasper Askren. 33 Ks to go, 17 seconds for Kasper Askren. We're thinking, how can he stay out all this time? Vermeersch was helping MVDP in the chase. Benji, do you think riders like Kung, Azadua, Citroen, I know De Koning had a big numerical advantage. Do you think they used some of their other helpers quickly enough or regularly enough to chase back Askren?
I think it took a tiny bit for Vermeers to get to the front, and it was mostly noticeable the moment where I think the De Koning riders were always in second wheel because they're an expert at blocking tempo in a group. Like every single time one of their riders is at the front, they put their riders in second and even third and fourth wheel just to make sure that when the first rider looks behind, he stares directly into the Koenig rider and the tempo blocks. And this was the case today because in that situation, well, the first rider didn't really want to ride anymore because he'd been riding for like a kilometer then. And he looks behind and it's all the Koenig riders and the tempo stocks. And it didn't just stop for like 10 seconds, it kind of stopped for like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And
Yeah.
then Vermeers came to the front. And I was like, oh, that's late, man. Come on. Somebody needed to react quicker. You've got multiple teams there with multiple teammates. And even a Naesen or Van Avermaet should, at this point, think in their heads who of the two should be working for the other. And I think they've got a real issue there as well. We'll talk about it later. And I just wanted to highlight the pure art when it comes to the Koenig, their masterclass in blocking the tempo in groups. And I saw a moment where I think Stibar was in second wheel and Seneschal was like fifth wheel, and he moved past everybody to get into the wheel of Stibar, and everybody let it happen. So the others just let it happen, the blocking of the tempo, and that's an issue. You got to try and counter that. You got to try and say to the guy that's in the first place pacing, okay, we're gonna do this together because otherwise it ain't gonna work. And Van der Poel had been working a lot in that group like crazy. Van Aert came to the front with Van der Poel at a certain point, also working like mad. And eventually that gap of 10, 11, 12 seconds, it went up again. 20 seconds, 25 seconds, 37 seconds at a certain point. And I was like, oh God, this dude's been riding solo for like 49 kilometers already. What are they going to do? They've got one climbing section left, and that's the Tichenberg. And if we all remember that, that's the place where Oliver Naesen should basically drop theoretically, because it's this infamous climb that he always seems to drop on, unfortunately. But tell us through what happened.
Also, they went into that climb. We were thinking MVDP and Wout van Aert hadn't been pulling so hard in the last 5 kilometers going into that climb. Gap was 30 thanks to quick step blocking. Wout van Aert attacked early on that climb, big attack, but then Mathieu van der Poel basically got a lead out from him on the climb, counted over the top of him with 20 Ks to go, and formed a group 2 12 seconds behind Askren with two Desert Citroën riders, Van Avermaet, Naesen, but unfortunately brought with him Seneschal and Stibar, two quick-step riders with Askren still up the road. Naesen and Van Avermaet started to cooperate with Van der Poel. They had to because the quick-step guys were obviously going to block in that group. Van Avermaet was basically pulling in this third group. I think it had Marco Haller still in there from the break. It wasn't a particularly strong group. A lot of riders were sitting on. I think Vermeersch was there and not pulling because Van der Poel was up the road. And it became very clear that they were going to close down Askren. 3 riders working against him. He'd been up the road for 50 plus Ks at this point. He got closed down with 12 Ks to go. There's no climbs left at this point in the race, but a lot of road furniture. They go into Harelbeke, twists and turns and corners. Quick-step riders can lose the wheel through corners. 8.5 Ks to go. There's 20 seconds to the Wout van Aert group, and people are messaging me saying, why haven't the De Koning riders attacked yet? They got 3 riders. They got Askren, Seneschal, and Stibar in this group. Well, firstly, Seneschal and Stibar are quick, probably quick, so you want to work over basically MVDP. I don't think they were too concerned about Naesen or Van Avermaet at all, really. Big concern was MVDP. He was working with them. So we've got Wout van Aert distanced. Why don't we get it to 5Ks, 4Ks, and then start to work over MVDP, not too early. That also allowed Askren to sit on. He got caught with 12Ks to go. You can't then attack at 9Ks to go. He was able to sit on for 6, 7Ks, not pulling at all, and then attacked with 5 kilometers to go. He immediately got a gap of about 5 seconds. MVDP was on the front. He didn't like attack across that gap. He just accelerated in the saddle a little bit. As it is Citroën, Benji, what were they doing at that point? Neither of them just started to pull. It was attack stop with Naesen and Van Avermaet.
Yeah, exactly. And if we give context to the situation, it's basically that in these last 5 kilometers before the Asgreen attack, De Koning had been helping out the pace with the 2 riders they had next to Asgreen, which means that they're slowly but surely thinking away or making sure the others don't think about Asgreen still hanging at the back of the group. And that is also, I think, what helped Asgreen to get that initial lead, because he chose to attack just before a traffic island in the middle with one of those yellow huge signaling things that they have in these
The Luca
races here in
Paolini
Belgium.
special.
Yeah, and he decided to attack around that, making sure that the others couldn't directly see it on the other side of the road, and they're like, oh, he's attacking. But in that situation, if you have 2 riders Argeser in that group, one of the 2 needs to react. If nobody reacts, Van der Poel isn't going to do it alone. The man is riding alone. He's got no teammates. De Koning isn't going to close it down. So it all comes down to, well, not Van Baarle either, because he doesn't have a teammate. So it all comes down to Argeser. And they've got 2 riders there. We've got Van Avermaet sitting in the wheel of, was it in the wheel of Van der Poel or 2 wheels behind?
No,
I think Oliver
that's the
Naesen is at the
problem.
back. Yeah.
It's what you mentioned before, Benji. You've got Van der Poel in the front,
Yeah,
Seneschal and Stibar on his wheel. We've got 3Ks to go. The gap's out to 10 seconds plus. Van der Poel's doing his best to pull, but he's going to flick the elbow at some
yeah,
point. He can't close it on his own. I mean, Askren, crazy strong, even to be able to attack
yeah,
at that point. And it's only when he flicks the elbow, he's got two grinning Cheshire cats, the navy blue DeKernick guys who'll look at him and say, nah. And then Van Avermaet and Naesen are like, oh, yeah, we should probably move up and try and help. It's like, it's too late. You've just given away 3 seconds again when that happens. And it's like you have to choose to sacrifice one at one point if you want to get a good result from the race. And they didn't. And both of them were in the lead group at the end. Neither of them got on the podium. And I think maybe they didn't have the legs to win anyway, whatever. But you got to sacrifice one, I think.
yeah.
And we mentioned it in the Age to Citroën preview podcast. This happened with Greg Van Avermaet with Trenton at CCC last year in stage 19 of the tour and stage 14. He rides, I think, in a way that he believes everyone should be riding for him, but he's not that rider anymore. And I think sometimes he needs to sacrifice at this point in his career. But anyway, 2Ks to go. Van der Poel attacks. Seneschal closes it. Askren's pretty much got 15 seconds. It's unbelievable. The guy that's been clear for 60Ks almost, and then he attacks again with 5Ks to go. He's riding away with the victory, ends up winning by 32 seconds on the group behind, who started finessing with 1,500 meters, 1K to go, and Askren wins the Danish national champion in the red. Seneschal won the bunch sprint for second, third, Mathieu van der Poel. But I want to throw to you again, Benji. When was the last time Quickstep were this demoralizing with their blocking, with their tactics for the other riders? Probably Brugge de Pan last year, to be honest, but this one's
Yeah,
really memorable for me.
yeah, this one's very memorable indeed because it's so linear in the way that they did it. The situations unfolded and it was unfolding before our eyes. We kind of could predict what they were going to do because it was kind of obvious what they were trying to enforce, and we knew that someone of the three would attack at the end. I was thinking perhaps it would be Stibar more because I didn't see Asgreen having the energy for another attack coming. Like genuinely, the man
Me
had been
either.
riding alone for 60 kilometers, and then he gets caught, and then he attacks again for a solo of 5 kilometers. But tactical masterclass, and I think the blocking was
Yeah,
shown today. I think last year we saw the same in not the year before when Jungels won something. I don't remember which race, but he won a solo as well. Was it
Kerner.
Kuurne? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the majority of this race, the Koenig was in somewhat of a full control. I think the only situation where they weren't 100% okay with was the attack of Van der Poel where Van Aert was following and then Stibar had to counter it. I think that's the only moment where they were like, oh, we got to hurry now because otherwise this ain't coming back. And they got that back and they kind of made sure that a situation like RVV last year did not happen. But you got to realize this is a very strong team and Ballerini is going to be better in the likes of, again, Dwevelgem than in this kind of race. But Alaphilippe's not even here yet.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I think we call it tactics. We call it a tactical masterclass, and you just brought it up there. It's easy to be a DS and say get in every move.
Yeah,
You got to man up the road, mark everything. But when Wout van Aert leads out Mathieu van der Poel on the Tegenberg, and then Van der Poel counters, there's not many people who can follow that. And if Stibar can't follow that with Seneschal, then you've got Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel. They'll do a 2-up TT, and they would have closed down Kasper Askren, and then they would have ridden with Askren on their wheel because they wouldn't have cared about him in the sprint. And one of those two probably would have won unless Quickstep had chased on the flat behind, which they may well have done too, because Wout van Aert and MVP were tied at this point. But you got to have the legs too. And Stibar didn't win today, didn't get on the podium, but very, very high level from him. And yeah, it's just, I mean, we criticised, as you were, Citroën a little bit, but at the end of the day, Quickstep had the numbers. They were too strong. They got in every move, every group, all day, and they would deserve to get the victory, and particularly memorable for Askren. Just rounding out the top 10, Askren, Seneschal, Van der Poel, Naesen, Stibar, Van Avermaet, Van Baarle, gap of 90 seconds to Marcus Hulgaard, 8th for UNOX, great result. Jenny Vermeersch and Marco Haller, a much deserved top 10 as my voice cracks, while Van Aert, he kind of was cooked at that point. He missed a bit on it at some point, don't know if that made a difference. He got a couple of 100 meters later, but yeah. What do you think about, how does this impact, say, Flanders, the classics to come, Benji? You know, it's pretty obvious this is the sort of thing Quickstep's trying to do. If you're Jumbo Visma, what do you take away from this race to try and do differently?
Well, it kind of leads us to discussing what Van Aert did on the Tichenberg, because he basically, I feel like it was a pure frustration attack in the sense
Was it
that
necessary?
it wasn't necessary. It wasn't necessary. Like, it wasn't necessary because
Do you think Askren
he
was
clearly didn't
closing
have it for a
anyway?
full attack. Well, looking at the Van der Poel attack afterwards, he probably would have done that attack if Van Aert didn't do it. But my main issue with it is that I think it was a pure frustration attack, and they had been the only two people pacing in that group for like a tiny bit before that Tichem, and I feel like on the Tichenberg, Wout van Aert was just like, well, fuck this. If nobody else is going to help us, then I'm just gonna push in an attack and hope you all drop. And then he put himself to the side, and he didn't really even bother following Van der Poel's initial move. He just went off to the side directly after his attack. So he probably was like, nah, go. I don't really care. And then after like 5 seconds, he was like, okay, probably I should care. I need to get back in this train, and then was too late to follow. So it was weird. Like, you don't attack and then drop like that instantly in such a nonchalant way. It like I don't believe that it was just out of, oh, I need to attack and then you're done. No, he was thinking. I think he was frustrated.
I think today also showed both Van der Poel and Wout van Aert that they're tremendous talents.
Yeah.
But in these classics, if you're isolated and have 3 quick-step riders in the group, you have a very low probability of winning, and you're going to get worked over. So they actually do need each other to work together to close down moves late. And I think a group of 5 or 6, even with 2 or 3 quick-step riders, they can manage that together. Ken Wevelgem last year, group of 12 plus, too big to control problems. Isolated Van der Poel today. It was, if he rode full, brought Askren back, Stibar would have attacked, and maybe Stibar would have won. And if he got brought back, Seneschal would have attacked. So it really, he was damned if he did, damned if he didn't, to be honest. But that was our E3 Saxo Bank Classic recap. We hope you enjoyed it. Before the race started, I just finalised a deal to show highlights of all the Flanders Classics races, similar sort of highlights that I've been showing for the ASO races on my channel. It doesn't include Tour of Flanders. There's some EBU stuff with that this year, but I'll have Gen Wevelgem this weekend, men and women's, Brabantse Pijl, Shell de Preich, Dwarsdorp of Vlaanderen, where I think Van der Poel and Alaphilippe are racing, as well as Amstel Gold Race, if I haven't missed anything. So that's really exciting. So I won't just have stage races, and I'll have some of those Flanders Classics races as well. So that's pretty good news, and that's mainly thanks to all your support on my main channel, etc. But the podcast helps too, because the race organizers look at the podcast and they're like, holy, like the previews, the support, the engagement is crazy. People really love it. And They probably just like it for Benji, to be honest. I'm a bit
Yeah,
too
I
bit too
completely
grumpy.
understand how they would
Yeah.
come to such a great opinion.
Yeah. All right. That was the E3 recap.